Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about one of those weird wrestling things. We're going to talk about Roman Reigns and his undisputed WWE Universal Championship. There seems to be some confusion as to what that title actually is and why the need was there to create a second or third title over there on Monday Night Raw, as opposed to them splitting the current titles that Roman Reigns has, and why they haven't melded that title into one. It all stems from this comment I got on a recent episode of Ask WrestleJuice. The question was posed, is Cody Rhodes still going to be the guy to take the title off of Roman Reigns? And this comment here was left on that video. It's from F Scorpion 678. It says, the fact that people don't understand that the Lesnar Reigns match was a unifying match and that Roman has always had one belt drives me up the wall. Here's the thing. I thought it was a really interesting comment, but I also understand the confusion behind it. It's one of those weird wrestling things. So I thought today I'd go on a little ramble about why it is people don't entirely understand the nature of Roman Reigns' undisputed WWE Universal Championship. Is it one belt? Is it two titles? Why did they make that other one on Raw when you could have just split these titles? Could somebody cash in on one title and not all the titles? If somebody won the Rumble, could they have elected just to go for one and not both? So I decided to do just a modicum of research for this because it got me thinking. And I like weird wrestling shit like this because wrestling is the kind of thing where people just write stuff and then it happens. So number one, let's look at the definition, right? Undisputed. What is undisputed? So I think that, obviously boxing has sort of established the precedent for this kind of stuff. So undisputed, somebody being undisputed is somebody who holds all the titles of a particular division. Now in boxing, there's four governing bodies. There's four sanctioning bodies, and it is the WBA, WBO, IWF, and the WBC. So if somebody holds all the titles, for example, the cruiserweight division, right? It's not the wrestling cruiserweight division and boxing cruiserweight division. If somebody holds all four of those governing bodies titles in that division, guess what? It is undisputed that they are champion. If they have two or more, then they're the unified champion. But if they're undisputed, it means they hold all the titles across that division. Now, wrestling is a little bit different. There aren't weight classes. There aren't weight divisions. And it's wrestling where everything is sort of played a lot looser because sometimes they just need to write stuff to happen to motivate storylines. So that's the definition. Right now, technically, once there's a champion awarded the new World Heavyweight Championship title, Roman Reigns should not be considered the undisputed WWE Universal. He should be considered the unified WWE Universal Champion because he unified those two titles. If he was undisputed, he would indeed also have the Raw brand, if Raw and SmackDown are considered the different sanctioning bodies of the WWE universe. However, they're not going to change the name of Roman Reigns' title because somebody else gets the World Heavyweight Championship, again, because it's wrestling and they just do whatever they want to do. But I thought that it was interesting, this comment, because historically in WWE, this hasn't been difficult for people to wrap their heads around. And I was like, why is that? Well, there's several factors involved. Number one, of course, is just historically, what Roman Reigns is doing right now is kind of unprecedented. So if you go back, the first time they unified the WWF and the WCW titles after WWF purchased WCW, that was in December of 2001. But they weren't actually unified as one title. They had the Winged Eagle and they had the big gold belt. They merged them together into that one undisputed championship on April 1st of 2001 or 2002. So it was really only about 4 or 5 months before they took the two titles and they merged them into one for Triple H, who then lost it to Hulk Hogan. And then in August, Brock Lesnar had the title and he signed exclusively to SmackDown. And then they created the big gold belt again. They just brought that back and called the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. In Raw, they gave it to Triple H. So at that point, Brock Lesnar really wasn't the undisputed WWE champion, although I still think that they referenced him as such. So the next time we had this situation, so back then, somebody carrying both titles, there was no second brand. It's not like somebody was like, well, I wonder if they're going to split the WCW title off of Chris Jericho right there and bring back WCW. Maybe people thought about that, but I don't think anybody realistically was thinking that was going to happen. And the amount of time between somebody having the merged title, the undisputed title in April, and then the draft happened, I think, around that same time. So there was only a SmackDown and a Raw for a very short period of time with one champion, but it was very explicitly said back then that whoever was the undisputed champion would be on both brands. It'd be a hard brand split, except for the unified champion would be on both brands. And then Brock decided to go to SmackDown exclusively because Stephanie gave him a bunch of money. And then they had to give Triple H the big gold title, and then history was made. So back then, there was no reason for people to think, I wonder if they're going to split these titles again, because there was no WCW. There was no second brand until there was, and they laid out explicitly, undisputed guy is on both places. And they had merged those titles anyways into one belt. So it was not a big deal. There was nothing to split. There were no physical belts to split. The next time we had that situation in December of 2013, Randy Orton unified the championships in a match against John Cena at TLC of that year. Now, whoever had the title at that point would carry around both of them, but at that point, Raw and SmackDown, the brand split was essentially meaningless. We were still about 2 years away from them doing another draft and sort of hard splitting the brands again. But if you remember back then, SmackDown essentially was like a Raw clip show. I went back and I watched it, one of the episodes, I think it was in December or January of that year of 2014. And my God, the number of times they flash back to the previous Raw to show you what happened so they could advance that same story on SmackDown with those same people was obscene. It was simply another 2 hours of Raw. That was SmackDown. There wasn't really a brand split back then. So again, there was no reason, I don't think, for anybody to think, I wonder if they're going to do that title over on SmackDown. I wonder if they're going to split those titles again. There was really no thought back then to, are they going to split these titles? So really, both situations where there were two separate physical belts representing one title, the thought never occurred to anybody really to split those titles again because there were no brands really to split them from, or they had already established that the unified champion was going to be defending it on both those brands. So historically speaking, there's really no precedent. Plus, Roman Reigns has been carrying around both those titles for over a year now. Both those physical titles with their own lineages, with, I'm not going to call it a hard brand split, but with an actual brand split, especially Roman Reigns being kind of a part-timer, the thought is in the minds of the internet wrestling community, are they going to split the titles? Are they going to split the titles? Well, why would they think that? Let's go to the next thing. They actually kind of did tease it in a way. So the tag titles, which were unified back in May of last year, were still referred to as SmackDown and Raw tag titles as early as this year. Earlier in this year, if you guys remember, on Raw, Judgment Day won like a match or a tournament or something to become number one contenders to specifically the Raw tag titles. And they had that match against the Usos, who only put up the Raw tag titles. Similarly, the next month or around the same time on SmackDown, Braun Strowman and Ricochet won a match or a tournament or something to become the number one contenders to the SmackDown tag titles. So in the same way that Roman's titles were considered unified, the tag titles were considered unified, and yet they did have matches that could have potentially split those titles. They never went that far with Roman, but given that the Usos are part of the bloodline, you'd think that the tag titles sort of go by the same rules as the unified heavyweight championship because they sort of came about it the same way. It was RK Bro and Usos, and they unified those titles. So they kind of teased the idea that a unified championship could then be de-unified, ununified. And then also the next thing is, and I know this might not matter to some of you, But there's been all sorts of reporting on it. Even just today, yesterday, Fightful Select had a report about sort of the background, the backstage details leading to the new World Heavyweight Championship. And in fact, back at day one last year, Roman Reigns was scheduled to do something, and then he got COVID, and instead they had Brock Lesnar win the WWE Championship, and then they ended up going to WrestleMania. But at the time, the plan was for Roman and Brock to fight at Mania, and like, I don't know, what was like Seth and Drew McIntyre or something like that, to fight for the WWE Championship. The idea had been out there to keep those titles separate, and then instead they went ahead and did the Brock thing at Elimination Chamber, where he won the title. But that all stemmed from Roman Reigns getting COVID. So that didn't happen. But all the reporting suggests that there have been ideas backstage pitched to the writing staff, to Vince McMahon, to split the titles. And this World Heavyweight Championship is a relatively recent thing. But both Fox and USA allegedly have both wanted their own world championships. And apparently, up until very recently, the idea was they would be splitting one of those titles off from Roman Reigns. Exactly how they were going to accomplish that, I don't think anybody ever came up with a good plan, because it's never really been reported on. I'm sure there's probably been a bunch of different pitches on it. So yeah. Another reason I think people have it in their heads that they'd like to see those titles split is because they like all the lineage stuff. At this point, let's face it, the lineage stuff is an absolute disaster. You got the WWE title lineage, which has the WWE title going back to like 1963 or 1962 or whatever. And then that, I think, has wrapped up into it when they unified the title, the big gold belt lineage, which went back to like, what, 88, 89, 90, 91, something like that, with all the WCW stuff in it. They never folded the ECW title into that, so that's a completely different thing. So yeah, and then now you got the Universal title wrapped up in that. And on top of that, literally Monday night on Raw, Paul Heyman referred to them as two titles, and he said, does Roman Reigns need a third title? So even Paul Heyman himself views that unified championship, or undisputed championship, as two titles. It is physically two belts, but I understand it goes by one title because they've been unified. And exactly how they would de-unify them at this point seems to be a moot issue. However, it seems like they should probably just merge those titles into one. Come up with a new title that looks really cool. It looks like the WWE and Universal Championship. I don't know how you do it. Maybe it's the same title, but the leather strap is like blue and black stripes or something like that. I don't know. How would you de-unify the titles if you're going to do that? It's not going to happen now because I got that new big old belt over on Raw. So yeah, I don't know. I thought it was kind of fun. I like venturing down memory lane with this kind of stuff because I get to go back and I get to see, oh, there's Brock with the brand new network title back in 2014. That's kind of cool. Anyways, let me know what you guys think of all this in the comments below. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Check out this video over here. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.